Finding slope from points is very, very similar to finding slope from a graph. At the end of the day, we're still looking at the rise over the run. Now the rise, that has to do with your change in y. It's your change in your y-axis, how much you're going up and down. For the run, you're going to be looking at your change in x, how much you change on the x-axis, your run. So for all of this, if you ever forget the formula, just think back logically. I want to look at my rise over my run. And you can even sketch out a graph to the side for yourself to make sure that you did it correctly. That's completely valid. In fact, it's encouraged. So formally, change in y and change in x. If we have 2 points, first one we'll call x1, y1, first x, first y. Second one we'll call x2, y2, second x, second y. You're looking at your change in y over your change in x. It doesn't truly matter which point you pick to be which, but what does matter is that you keep them straight. So if you use your second point first for the y, you've got to use your second point first for the x. This will make a lot more sense once I start actually doing it with numbers. So let's say I had the points 1, 2, and the point 3, 4. And I wanted to find the slope for this. So my slope is change in y over change in x. Let's go ahead and label them as such. So I'll call this one my x2, y2, and I'll call this one my x1, y1. So my second point and my first point. So let's go ahead and do y2. So one of my y's minus the other y's. One of my x's minus the other x. Now we simplify from here. 4 minus 2 gets me 2. 3 minus 1 also gets me 2. Now this simplifies, right? 2 divided by 2 just gives me 1. So I've simplified my slope. I found that I have a slope of 1. Let's try it with a different example. Let's say I had the points -1, 3, and the point -4, -5. Again, I'm going to go ahead and label x1, y1, x2, y2. And let's go ahead and start to find our slope. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my formula. I'm doing y2 minus y1, change in y, x2 minus x1, change in x. So then we do -5 minus 3, my y2 minus my y1, over -4 minus, I'm going to go ahead and put my -1 in parentheses because I got to remember, I'm subtracting a -1. I'm not subtracting a +1. So that will change up my answer a little bit. Now when I subtract these guys, I should end up with -8 over -4 minus -1. That's going to get me -3, because remember I'm subtracting a negative, which merely means I'm adding a positive. Also, your calculator can do that for you too if you like. Now, are there any numbers that go into both 8 and 3? No, there are not, so that part of the fraction can stay the same. However, a negative divided by a negative gets me a what? A positive. So I've got to be sure to rewrite this as +8 over +3. Let's do a couple more examples together. Let's say I was given the points -5, -20, and -4, -15. Again, I'm going to go ahead and label my points x1, y1, x2, y2. Subtract y2 minus y1. I'm literally just going to go ahead and rewrite my formulas and label everything. If I label everything and rewrite the formula, there's not room for me to go wrong. So let's go ahead and do -15 minus -20. I'm going to go ahead and put -20 in parentheses just so I remember I'm subtracting a negative over -4 minus negative 5. Now let's go ahead and do this. Negative 15 minus negative 20, that's going to get me 5. Negative 4 minus negative 5, that's going to get me 1. 5 over 1, 5 divided by 1, that's just going to get me 5. Alright, now if you do get some fractions such as 8 over 4, you've got to remember I can divide both the top and the bottom by the same thing, and then I will get myself 2 over 1, which becomes 2. Or you can go ahead and do 8 divided by 4. Either way, you're going to get 2. If I get something like 8 divided by 6, my calculator is going to spit out a decimal, so I've got to go ahead and simplify this by asking what goes into both 8 and 6. Well, 2 goes into both 8 and 6, so divide both the top and the bottom by 2, and I get 4 over 3. You do need to simplify your fractions. Delta Math will not be happy if you don't simplify your fractions. There are ways to make the internet do that for you. I'm not too mad if you use those ways. However, you are capable of simplifying a fraction on your own too. Alright, let's look at a couple of exceptions as well. Let's say I have negative 5 comma negative 5 and 4 comma negative 5. Now we already noticed before we even start messing around calculating it out, these guys have the same exact y value. So if I were to think visually what's going on a graph, both of these points are down here at a y value of negative 5. Now what do I already know that slope should be? I already know it should be 0. But let's formally figure out using the formula why it is. So we've got x1, y1, x2, y2. Go ahead and do y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. I get negative 5 minus negative 5 over 4 minus negative 5. Now anything subtracted itself should get me 0, which is exactly what I get here, because negative 5 minus negative 5 turns into negative 5 plus 5, which either way I get 0 over, this gets me 9. 0 divided by anything is just 0. Now let's say I had the other exception to the rule. Let's say they had the same exact x value. So again, if I were to think about this logically, this means I've got 2 points down here with the same exact x value. What do I already know this slope is going to be? It's going to be undefined. So I can go ahead and put down, so this will be an undefined slope, I already know. I think there might be a different word on that for Delta Math, anything that implies it's not defined, if anything besides 0 or a number, that's going to be your answer you're going with, it's undefined. So then we're going to go ahead and do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I get negative 15, let's go ahead and label that. x2, y2, so I get negative 15 minus negative 10 over 3 minus 3. I'll end up with a negative 5 divided by 0. Can I divide by 0? No, I cannot, so you can't do that. Can't do whenever you end up dividing by 0. Whenever you end up dividing by 0, that's when you get undefined. So let's recap. Let's summarize what it is we just saw. So, the way you find slope from points is by finding the change in y over the change in x. You can go ahead and label which point you want to label x1, y1, which point you want to label x2, y2. And then you go ahead and subtract y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. If you end up getting a fraction that needs to be simplified, like 20 over 15, you have to ask yourself what goes into both of these numbers. For example, both of these have 5 go into it, so divide both the top and the bottom by 5. I get 4 over 3. If you end up with something where it's got a negative over a negative, you've got to say a negative divided by a negative gives me a positive. Go ahead and simplify that. If it's something that's just able to be easily divided, like 4 over 1, go ahead and say that's 4. If you end up getting that you have to divide by 0, you can't divide by 0. That's undefined. If you get 0 divided by anything, that just ends up equaling 0. Which, no matter what, you always could plot your points and check it with finding it graphically. However, you are still responsible for being able to find it just algebraically like this. Just check your work. Feel free to reach out with any questions. I hope this was helpful.